From advertising to software as a service to data.
Across all of our programs and clients, we've seen a 55 to 65% open rate.
Getting brands authentically integrated into content performs better than TV advertising.
Typical lifespan of an article is about 24 to 36 hours.
If we're reaching out to the right person with the right message and a clear call to action, then it's just a matter of timing.
Welcome to the MarTech Podcast, a Ben J. Schaap LLC production. In this podcast, you'll hear the stories of world-class marketers that use technology to drive business results and achieve career success. We'll unearth the real-world experiences of some of the brightest minds in the marketing and technology space so you can learn the tools, tips, and tricks they've learned along the way. Now here's the host of the MarTech Podcast, Benjamin Shapiro.
Welcome to Content Business Week on the MarTech Podcast. This week, we're going to talk about everything we've learned over the past 2.5 years running a monetizable content business. Each day this week, we're going to publish an episode that walks you through how you can create, publish, syndicate, monetize, and scale a business where content is the product. Joining me today is the man behind the scenes here at the MarTech Podcast, my head of content production, Mr. Todd Hines. So far this week, Todd and I have talked about how to find and vet guests for your content project. And today we're going to talk about publishing and syndicating your content. Okay, here's the second part of Content Business Week. Todd, welcome back to Content Business Week.
Thanks, man. Good to be back with you.
Good to have you on the show, buddy. Always nice to do a podcast with somebody in the room.
Amen. Absolutely.
So look, yesterday we talked about when you're creating content, how do you find guests if you're doing an interview format? And even if you're not doing an interview format, really the key is be consistent, understand the channel that you're publishing in, and try to work with and find content that's going to have a broad reach. Today, we're going to talk about publishing and syndicating content. Todd, we've moved from publishing content once a week to publishing 7 days a week. How has the content production process changed? And walk everyone through what we're doing and what are the steps that we have to go through to get a piece of content ready for publication.
There are a lot of moving parts. Let me start by saying it can't happen without a solid team and really strong internal communication. So in addition to the processes we've built and the software and the tools we rely on, we have a team of people who work closely together. Zori, Yasmin, Panos obviously is our editor. So with that core group, we're really able to leverage software that we have to help us manage content scheduling, content production, and really just stay organized and execute week over week.
Yes, the team is incredibly important. And we've grown the team over time. Originally, it started with just me doing the content production. And then it was me and Panos. And then it was me, you, and Panos. And now we've scaled. And there's actually 7 people that are working on content production on a regular basis, all the way through publication and then syndication. Walk everyone through the process of, okay, we talked about how to find an interview guest, right? I go and I record the piece of content and we go through a couple different stages where I am going through, there's a guest that we're reaching out to, that the guest has been confirmed, that the interview has been scheduled. And then we get to, okay, the audio is unedited, right? When I'm done recording an interview, I'm taking the audio files, I'm dropping them into Dropbox, and I mark Panos as responsible because he's responsible for editing the audio. What's the workflow after the audio is edited?
So we have someone who creates show notes. So the trigger after a piece of audio is edited is for us to begin taking the transcript. We generate a transcript of that episode. And then from that transcript, Yasmin generates show notes. In parallel to the creation of the show notes, which we'll eventually publish on the webpage, we begin scheduling the episode on our hosting platform, which is Art19. And we have another teammate named Zori who goes through that process for us. She writes a quick description of the episode, adds the ad insertion points, and makes sure everything is uploaded properly and scheduled. And then we also, from there, create a page using Squarespace that features the episode and the guest and a little bit of information about the guest. So finally, then, once the episode is scheduled in Art19 and we have the show notes complete, we tie everything together there on the Squarespace page, and everything is scheduled to be published at 5 a.m. on the morning that it goes out. And in addition to that, we have a guest communication process that we follow. So during each step of the preparation for the episode being published, we're actually checking in and letting the guest know, hey, your episode has been edited. Here's the content. Have a listen. Let us know what you think. We send another email with a reminder of the published date. And then we always let our guests know on the morning that we've scheduled everything to go live. We send a link to that webpage that the guest can then share.
So there's a lot of moving pieces there. And when I was first doing all of the content production on myself, when I first launched the MarTech podcast, it was really easy to think about what the steps were. It was, I have a piece of audio, I'm going to put it on my hosting platform, it's going to be published, and then I need to email the guest saying, hey, the content's been published. And maybe I was emailing the guest a little bit early and saying, here's the content and when it's going to be published. Now that we're working on multiple pieces of content per week, we're doing one a day, it gets pretty complicated. And so the technology you're using really matters here. And we've gone through a couple of different technology platforms. We used Airtable for a really long time. We're moving towards a more integrated solution in Monday.com, where it allows us to not only do content production, but also to understand what's happening in the rest of our business. Because for us now, the content is tied into our sponsorship model, and we need to think about more than just the content production. My point is, you need to stay organized and understand what state each piece of content is. And there's lots of content calendaring tools you can use. Some of them are free, some of them are expensive. But what matters the most is that you understand what stage a piece of content is and who's responsible for it. And at each stage, they have the understanding of the micro tasks they need to execute and who they need to hand it on to. Essentially, you're creating an assembly line is really what we've done. So, Todd, outside of, okay, the audio content gets produced, we build a web page, we submit it to our hosting platform, and then it gets published on a date. You mentioned coordinating with our guests, and then there's also the idea of content syndication. Talk to me a little about the guest management side when you're going through the content production process. What are the different things that we need to tell our guests to make sure that they're aware of what's happening?
We can think about it in three basic parts. The first is the lead up to the episode being published. So we want to give them the edited audio files and give them a chance to provide any feedback. And then also let them know the date on which we have their episode scheduled to be published. The second part is letting them know on the morning that the episode is published and then providing them with a link to actually share that content. And that will be a link to their unique webpage that we've created on our website. And then we encourage them to share that on social media and with their network. And that can be done over a period of days. If it's a 2, 3, 5-part episode, then they have a chance to share each part throughout the week. And finally, the third part of our communication is the summary and what we give to guests a week after their episode has been published, which runs through the statistics. And we take screenshots of the performance of their episode to give them a sense of their reach and the listenership of those episodes. So those are the basic 3 parts that we want to give every one of our guests.
Here's the content. We hope you like it. If you need us to make any changes, let us know. Here's the content that's published today. We'd love for you to share it. Here's how the content performed, and here's how we'd like to continue to work with you. And the reason why I'm breaking down what Todd said in a more simplified fashion is when you're reaching out to your guests, this is a great way to build business relationships. It's a great way to show your professionalism, stay on top of things. If you're able to communicate effectively, not over communicate, but just be concise and show that you're on top of things, it's going to frame you in a positive light. So whether you're doing lead generation for your business, whether you're trying to sell someone sponsorships, whether you're just asking for referrals for other guests, whatever the case may be, being on top of it, keeping people aware and updated is a very important step. And I think the last thing I want to talk about is content syndication. Once you've published your content and it's out in the ether, you're not done working. An important part of growing a content business is having a syndication model. Now, Todd, for us, we use a host. You said that before. Talk to everybody about what our podcast host does.
Yes, R19 is what we use. So that is the platform onto which we load the edited audio file and also determine the published date. So we actually schedule when Art19 will release that audio file into the podcast feeds on a given date and time, and also allow us to do things like dynamic ad insertion.
So the important part of what Todd's saying is that we have a central location that we can drop our audio files, and this is kind of how podcasts work. We upload our content into Art19, and it sends it to all of the different podcast readers around the world. So whether you're in Spotify or Overcast or iTunes or, I don't know, there's a million of them, Player FM, we don't actually think about getting our content into all of those app stores. It's done for us. We're spreading our content around. Now, there is other ways to syndicate your content, and honestly, some things that we can do a better job of, taking our content and running Facebook campaigns for it to distribute, understanding who are the likely consumers and make sure that we're using some paid media to share it. That's a very common practice with blog posts for B2C brands. They're taking their content, seeing who's interested in it. Once somebody self-selects to say that, yes, they're interested in reading this piece of content, they know that they're likely to be interested in their products or services, and then they start running direct response campaigns to them. So whether you're going to pay for content syndication, whether you're trying to drive organic content syndication, a couple things to think about. What are the channels? Are you getting into the biggest platforms within your medium? Do you have people that are going to be able to syndicate the content for you? In our case, our guests. Can you pay to syndicate the content? And the last one is, do you have the ability to drive organic growth? And for us, that is optimizing our podcast titles, making sure that our web pages are SEO optimized, to make sure that we're getting as much organic reach as we possibly can. So lots of different things that you can do. And this is really where marketing gets complex and creative. Once you've published a piece of content, there's a bunch of different tricks to be able to get it out there and make sure that you're not only growing the consumption of that content, but also you're building an awareness for your overall brand. And that wraps up this episode of the Martech Podcast. Thanks for listening to Todd and my conversation. If you'd like to hear more of our tips for running a content business, we're going to publish an episode every day this week. So hit the subscribe button in your podcast app and check back with us tomorrow morning when we talk about monetizing content. Just one more link in our show notes I'd like to tell you about. If you didn't have a chance to take notes while you were listening to this podcast, head over to martechpod.com, where we have summaries of all of our episodes, contact information for our guests. You can subscribe to our once-a-week newsletter. You can even send us your topic suggestions or your marketing questions, which we'll answer live on our show. Of course, you can always reach out on social media. Our handle is MarTechPod, MarTechPod, on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Or you can contact me directly. My handle is Ben J. Shap, BenJShap. And if you haven't subscribed yet and you want a daily stream of marketing and technology knowledge in your podcast feed, we're going to publish an episode every day this year. So hit that subscribe button in your podcast app and we'll be back in your feed tomorrow morning. All right, that's it for today. But until next time, my advice is to just focus on keeping your customers happy.